U.S. military actions in Somalia have seemingly taken a big toll on the local population. Newly revealed documents claim the U.S. Africa Command has long been aware of multiple deaths of civilians as a result of its operations. We cross live now to New York, and RT's Caleb Maupin for more. Caleb, how serious is this alleged revelation?
Well, the documents that were obtained under the Freedom of Information Act and reportedly compiled by AFRICOM personnel actually reveal some rather shocking details about a U.S. drone strike that took place in April of 2018. Now, at the time that drone strike took place, the reports initially said that 5 terrorists had been killed, 1 vehicle had been destroyed, and that no civilians had been harmed. However, a year later, we have the United States coming forward and saying that, in fact, there were 2 civilians who were killed, a woman and a child, that were killed. Now, if you look at this document that's being received by The Intercept, it reportedly tracked 14 allegations. AFRICOM was tracking 14 different allegations of civilian deaths that took place. 2 of them being deemed to be credible. And it appears, if you look at the document, that there were a lot more civilian deaths in Africa as a result of U.S. drone strikes than previously reported. Let's review.
AFRICOM says it conducted 110 airstrikes that killed 800 terrorists. It's just not plausible that all of the people killed were actually enemy armed forces and that none were civilians.
Now, AFRICOM says that it has eliminated 800 terrorists and that only 2 civilians have been killed in these operations. However, Amnesty International has very different numbers, saying that the USA has carried out over 100 strikes since 2017, and which claimed 14 civilian lives in just 5 of these strikes. So of the 100 strikes carried out since 2017, in just 5 of them, 14 civilians lost their lives. Now, so that raises the question, what about the other 95 attacks? And that raises the question about how many could have died. And AFRICOM at this point is saying that its mission in Somalia is about a security component. This is AFRICOM on the U.S. mission regarding drone strikes and operations in Somalia.
For our part, US Africa Command and the US military are committed to serving as the security component of the broader political diplomatic efforts of the US mission to Somalia, whether it is in protecting US personnel and facilities or in supporting Somali forces through train and equip, as well as advise and assist missions.
Now, we have reached out to both Amnesty International and the U.S. African Command, AFRICOM, for comment. They have not gotten back to us, but it appears, based on this new document, that the number of civilian deaths due to U.S. drone strike operations in Africa could be much higher than has been previously reported.
Caleb Maupin reporting live from New York. Thank you. For live analysis, let's cross to Chris Nineham, who's deputy chair of the Stop the War Coalition. Now, do you believe the U.S. purposely scaled down the number of civilian casualties?
Well, that's difficult to say. We don't have enough evidence here, but I think what is clear from this leak, and it's also very clear from the Amnesty International report that came out a couple of months ago, that there is a kind of unreported war being conducted by the West and by the US in Somalia, completely underneath the radar of media or other scrutiny. There is a systematic operation of attacks being carried out by the US, which are definitely leading to many, many more civilian casualties than are being admitted to or reported. I mean, the Amnesty International report just looked at 5 cases where they found that the US was massively underestimating the number of deaths. That's 5 attacks out of a number that probably reaches up to 100 or so in the year up to the time the report was compiled. So we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of people. That's civilian deaths. Hundreds of civilian deaths taking place, which are basically not being admitted to, not being reported on, and not being recognised. It's a very scary situation that this level of foreign intervention can be going on behind the back of the public or the press or any kind of democratic scrutiny.
Why do you think it took the U.S. almost a year to admit that even 2 civilians were killed in that 2017 drone attack?
I've no idea why they suddenly came out with this figure, but the idea that you can have a kind of military campaign that leads to the death of 800, allegedly 800 al-Shabaab militants without killing any civilians is completely ludicrous. Obviously, all the evidence about drone attacks and about targeted missile attacks, and we're talking about both in this particular war. The idea that you can have that level of operations and not be killing civilians is completely absurd. And so, I mean, it's obvious from these events and from this kind of coverage from the US military that they're covering up on a grand scale the amount of killing that they're involved in.
Well, and at the same time, these documents show that it's possible that they knew civilians would be killed in these strikes and they went forward with them anyway. Why do you think that they chose to go ahead and go forward? Was this just collateral damage for them?
Well, I mean, I think that in reality, the military command does know that drone strikes on average do kill significant numbers of civilians, that any missile attack is liable to create what is called collateral damage. In other words, the illegal, unlawful killing of civilians. I think they know this all the time, and I think there's a kind of myth that is deliberately propagated that the modern forms of targeted missile attack and drone attacks are somehow, free from any kind of human cost. I mean, really, this is a war that shouldn't be happening anyway, that hasn't been voted on, that hasn't been agreed, and is arguably illegal. Leaving aside the question of civilian casualties, it's certainly a war that most of the world's population don't know the US is involved in. But, it's also definitely causing much more misery and suffering amongst the wider population than is being admitted. There's no question about that.
Chris Nineham, Deputy Chair of the Stop the War Coalition, thank you for your time and your comments.